type 3 experience. So for those that may not be as familiar, maybe this is your type, or maybe you have a 3 in your life. The 3 is known as the achiever, the role model, the motivator, sometimes the performer or the chameleon, because they have this ability to kind of shape shift and be whoever they need to be in that room or in front of that person, whoever it is. Their strengths are efficiency, strategic planning. They do tend to be natural leaders who love to goal set. They are the model of hard work and hustle. I say this is the type that has the hustle harder t-shirt. They bring passion and motivational energy to their office or their online communities, to their family, to their friend circles. We'll get into maybe some of the challenges and struggles later, but what about this energy specifically speaks to you, Christie?
All of it. I mean, just starting with achiever, when I think back on my life, I think about the mile markers are the achievements. It's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, making a certain level of team, um, being it's a captain of that team, getting certain grades on certain test scores and taking a certain amount of AP courses, getting into certain schools, getting certain GPAs, just always striving for the next thing and always needing to do what I perceived and what others perceive as being the best and being the most successful. Um, and sometimes to my detriment, right? I'm sure we'll get to that. But yeah, efficiency, like I always need a plan. I always, my friend always would joke in high school that I was like the queen of flashcards and note cards, and all of my study guides were color coordinated and organized in a way that helped me flow better and understand. And I'm constantly organizing and reorganizing the house so that my morning flows better. I don't have to go back and forth as much. Yeah, planning. I don't like to be surprised. I want to know what's coming, and I'm much better off. Like, even as a kid, I was the one that if I had to get a shot or an uncomfortable procedure at the doctor, it was like, I need to know every step of the way before you start it, because then I can prepare and I know what's coming. um, yeah, I mean, and as far as like leadership, like I said, I've always been a team captain. I was a peer leader. I've led sales teams, moving more into adulthood. Sales, I know, is like part of that because of the whole chameleon thing. Like, for sure, I can remember being heavily in sales and sort of, finding that thing that connected us and like leaning into it, connecting us meaning the client, and
Right.
really, leaning in and to the point where they thought we were best friends by the end of it. Yeah, hustle, like nothing. I'm hardest on myself. No one is harder on
Yeah.
me than myself. I'm it's funny because so much of what I've done in the last 2 years is to combat a lot of this, right? So I
Mhm.
relate to it all and I work at it all, but it's hard even to like talk about it a little bit, because the hustle harder, the never enoughness, I feel deeply. I'm
Mm.
never doing enough. There's always more to do, but I'm really actively trying to work against that and show myself the grace and compassion that we were talking about earlier. Um, but the passion, the motivation, I think that all relates well as far as all of the positions that I've said that I've held in my life, and now with my show, right? Like, really wanting to help people, wanting to be a voice for someone who doesn't have a platform, um, and knowing where I'd like to take my show, and knowing that I would like it to be, speaking engagements, a book, a platform, a personal brand, like the whole 9 yards. I mean, that all fits.
It absolutely does. And then it also, like some of the things that you've already touched on, are examples, I think, of growth. And one that jumps out is like the quiet walk to the mailbox.
Yeah.
And for a lot of threes, and I will say too, and I've said this anytime we talk about the three, I think we have a ton of type three energy in the United States culture. And so I think most people from standard society, school, it's kind of set up with that energy, so we can all relate to that a little bit. But it's very deep for the three, but they have this tendency to want to be like effective, productive, efficient at all times. And so an example is like, I'm going to listen to a podcast in the shower so I can just get the most out of my day and constantly be productive.
Like one of the things that I've had to really deal with is relating like with food and body, and like I actually saw eating as a waste of time.
Oh yeah.
I had to actually, because exactly, it was like, I could be doing something else right now. And then I would just grab, a bar or something that's easy and doesn't take a lot of time, but it's not as nutritious and not as fulfilling and not as all the things. And so, but yeah, even I have actually, this is so funny you say that. I have set a goal for myself that I will have an undistracted lunch. Especially when my kids aren't home. Like I will not pick up a book. I will not pick up my phone. I will not have the screen open for the time that I'm eating, because I see it as a waste of time. Yeah. I always need to be, if I'm going to go for a walk later and I'm going to listen to a podcast that's self-development. I won't just take in the birds and the bees. No, I need something that is like killing two birds, one stone, done.
Yes, yeah, get the most. But, or I should say, and another example of that though, is that, let's get the groceries delivered. And that's not necessarily, a bad thing. It's like, we can bring in the gifts, the strengths, that efficiency. And I know you're doing it because you don't want to take your kid to pull off stuff from the shelf. I 100% feel that. Or like, you don't want to push the ginormous, cart with like the car on it. That's like incredibly hard to steer.
Oh my God. It's like driving a Subaru through Suburban. I was going to say Suburban through the store.
Yeah. So I get it. And also like, that's just like, how can we make our lives, easier, like regardless of what type you're identifying with, more efficient, but then also noticing where it starts to shift into kind of self-sabotage or in an unhealthy way. The other thing, let's see, I was going to ask you about that. I know that I brought up, goal setting, model hard work. I will say too, something else that you mentioned at the beginning was around feelings and emotions. Oh, this was it, I think. Type threes. I don't know how much you've read about this, but this is for those that maybe don't know as well. Threes are in that feeling center of intelligence where they say like twos, threes, fours have a tendency to lead with their heart, lead with their feelings. However, threes feel things. It's just they feel them and then immediately push them to the side because they're unproductive. It's getting in the way of the goal. Does that resonate?
Yes and no, right? Like, yes, it's hard because I do think of myself as a very emotional person and I feel a lot of feelings, and I am the one in my friend group who pushes for the deep conversation. But it's because I don't have time for surface level. I'm like, this is I could gather the surface level information from Instagram. I want to know how your relationship's doing.
Yeah.
I want to know if you're, crying when you take a shower because you're miserable in the morning. Like I don't want to know about the apple picking you did last week unless it had an emotional impact on you. Because, I'm like, I don't have time. Just get real off the bat.
Yeah, let's jump in. Let's dive in. That's a little bit, that's some four energy there too.
Yeah.
So yeah. And again, it's just like interesting to consider and reflect on and notice. And it's really fun, but then it can also be really helpful. Again, just kind of notice like, where have I maybe swung too far to one end or the other? I don't know if any of these resonate. These are common, tendencies where threes may struggle more than others. One of them is coming across as impatient when they talk to their teams or their groups or even their clients. Threes, sevens, and eights are in this like assertive stance. And I actually just did a workshop last week, and a woman talked about how, like, when people are having a conversation, kind of just talking about surface level details or getting too detailed about a story, she literally is like this. You can't see what I'm doing, but I'm like rushing my hand kind of along because she's like, let's get to the
And
point.
I'm nodding profusely, like, yes. Oh my gosh, get on with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And they can feel like no one will do it as good as they can. So they may struggle with delegation. Sometimes they can be dismissive or frustrated when they do feel like somebody is wasting their time. And then they can ignore others' feelings, which we just kind of talked about, or their own, in order to get the job done. Again, sometimes this comes across as like, I feel this, but like, we don't have time for it right now. Move to the side, come back later. The problem is, and that's necessary sometimes, right? But the problem is when you don't circle back. So what out of that do any of those challenges or struggles really stand out to you?
Yeah, I just, this week in therapy, I was telling my therapist that I had a situation with my friends where, we were at dinner and I asked them to go round robin and, tell us something about the relationship and this and that. And we had this like really, really great, vulnerable, like open conversation. And I was sharing with her that I was reminded that it has always been my role to facilitate this level of depth in our relationship. Like, I am the glue, I'm why they all know each other. And I always push for that level of conversation. And she asked me if I was okay with that role. And I said, I absolutely love that role. But it occurs to me, who does it for me? And I shared with her that we went round robin, but that I went last. And I sort of, like, when it was my turn to share, I sort of just was like, da, 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 da. Okay. Anyway, so, and it's not because I'm scared to share. Like, I have a whole podcast about all my issues. It just was like, I know my issues. I know what I need to know. I have my therapist. I have all the things. Like, let's keep it on you, And I think that speaks exactly to that. I definitely felt deeply the waving of the hand,
like, let's go.
the let's go. If there are details of a story that are actually not relevant to the end goal of the story, I'm like, no, you've lost me. I definitely can struggle with delegation. I certainly think I do everything the right way, unless it is like, if I'm super interested in something, I want you to have no part of it. If I could care less about it, I don't care. Take it all. I don't have time for it.
Right. I don't get the whole time.
It's not, I'm controlling, but not over things that don't matter to me. I'm not controlling for the sake of being controlling. It's controlling because if I'm into it, I certainly want to know it's done right. And dismissive, honestly, the example that came to mind is there are times where my husband will suggest we do something when it comes to our kids. Like, he'll, I don't know, he'll be like, hey, can we switch their applesauce to pudding? And I'm just like, no, and he's like, what? Like, I don't know, I'm trying to like say it without saying it right, but basically a common struggle in our house is that he feels like I just dismiss his suggestions without talking about it. And it's like, in my mind, I've already gone down the road of this, and if I needed or wanted your opinion on it, I would have asked you. Oh. And that's not to say everything, right? I certainly value his opinion. I value his opinion greatly if he ever listens to this. And there's certainly things where I really lean on him for his expertise and opinion and knowledge, but there's certain lanes, as I will call them, in our life where appreciate you, but I've already done all the rabbit holes on this. And so when he brings it up, my impulse to be like, absolutely not. And he's like, I'm not an employee. Like, we need to just do me the favor of humoring the conversation for at
Yeah.
least like a 30 seconds. And I'm like, fine, like, I do that for love. Okay. But
Yeah.
otherwise, no.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's again, it's just like, okay, I know that I do this. I know that that's my partner is not like this, or maybe my a teammate or employee, whatever situation you're in. And it's like, okay, I may have to adjust because I know this is a thing I do. So yeah, I know it is so interesting. Last kind of Enneagram specific question is one of the most helpful pieces that I hear from my clients, especially in the typing process, is the understanding of the stress arrow or your stress type that you go to. And for a 3, they have a tendency after they have depleted their own coping mechanisms, defense strategies, they will make a lateral move and not become a 9, but take on some of the 9's stress coping mechanism tendencies in those situations. And for a 3, what that might look like is you are so productive, so busy, constantly moving that in a burnout time in your life, where you're in that 9 space, you actually numb out. You become disengaged. You might withdraw. You might become apathetic, kind of like using Netflix maybe to cope. Even self-doubting, right? Can happen in those burnout moments. And I typically have heard from 3s who do tend to have it, or at least look on the outside like they have it all together. They're doing a lot, they're very busy, but then also, and it's been really, really cool on this podcast and then just talking with people, they will kind of open up about a burnout moment that was like a wake up call. Sometimes it's multiple burnout moments. And this can happen to anybody, but I know for 3s, it's very much like, I just couldn't do it anymore. Has that happened to you? Does that sound relevant?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely can certainly get to the point of numbing out. And immediately what came to mind was that's when depression kicks in for me. That burnout moment came summer of 2020. I had a 2.5-year-old and a 6-month-old, and we're in lockdown, unsure of everything, COVID, pandemic, all of it. Hadn't seen any family, any friends, no support, no babysitters, no tummy time, no library, no nothing. And we're day in and day out doing this thing with these kids, home alone every day, and still getting up 2-3 times a night to feed, and just exhausted. And yeah, that moment came hard, because again, as an achiever, things like that don't happen to me. I don't find myself in a place where I can't start the day without a good cry. I don't find myself in a place where I'm exhausted before I even wake up because I know what's coming in my day and I'm already dreading it. And I really can and then find myself in a position where things that would normally bring me joy, I'm indifferent towards.
Yeah.
And there are days, certainly, days or weeks, periods of time where, my husband will come home and I've put the kids to bed and it's 7:30 and I am in bed. And it's not because I'm physically tired. It's because I can't think of anything else to do. Like, there's nothing else that feels right. So rather than try to keep miserably pushing myself through an activity or something, a show that is just going to irritate me, it's just easier to shut down and get under the covers in a dark room. So, all of this is about, experiencing that place and not wanting to do what I can to not get there often. But it happens. It certainly happens. Yeah. Back then it happened more often, right? But as the kids get older, as life started to open up again, I mean, that was a whole other transition. As life opened up, like, that was anxiety provoking and all the things. But As we get them into a little bit more school and I start to find a rhythm, that happens less often, but it is what happens.
Thank you for being so open about that,
Yeah, sure.
because I know that you are absolutely not the only one that has felt some version of that. So,
Yeah.
a lot of people are probably here nodding along. Um, what is something that helps you, and maybe it's therapy, but I should say, is there anything else that you use to help you kind of deal with those stressful moments when you're feeling overwhelmed? What a tool, a community resource, anything that maybe we could learn from your experience and possibly incorporate into our own lives?
Yeah. I I would not say that I have a meditation practice. I am not a regular meditator, but there are times where if I have that feeling, whether it's in the middle of the day or at night, where I'm being pulled to the dark room in my bed, like that's feeling like where I want to be, I will say to myself, put on a 5-minute meditation and see how you feel.
Mm.
And there are days where that's exactly what I need. I just need 5 minutes of rest. I will close my eyes, I'll listen to the meditation, and I literally just like Google or YouTube a 5-minute meditation and pick one. Um, and there are days where by the end of that, I feel like, okay, I could nap. I need to sleep. Or it's not enough, right? It's not always enough. But point is that in those 5 minutes, I'm giving myself the rest and the stillness to really look inward and say, what is it that I need? And yeah, like I said, I've heard meditation from everyone, but I'm not a girl that wakes up and namaste's crisscross applesauce every morning
Yeah.
in a perfect space. It's just when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling like I just want to crawl into a ball, like I will call upon that as something,
Mm.
to try first. Um, if possible, I will try to get outside, and that is where the mailbox walk started because, especially when my kids are home, I can't necessarily go for a half-hour walk. And if you have toddlers, you know that sometimes walking with your kids is the least relaxing thing in the world. So I started walking to the mailbox, breathing, breathing, honestly. Sometimes I will get in the shower, a really cold shower for just a minute or two,
Mm.
and that feels good. It usually starts with just saying, what do I need?
Yeah. Oh, so good.
Yeah.
So good.
I didn't think if there was something else. Yeah, I think, it could be any, it could, that's the base of it, right? Because then sometimes it's, well, actually, no wonder you feel like crap. You've only had coffee today. You
Right.
need to eat, and so it just depends on what's going on. But it all starts from whether it's the true 5-minute meditation or just stepping outside for a minute and talking to myself and asking what I need.
That's such a great question. And not to make everything about the Enneagram, but I think sometimes it can be a tool to help us create a checklist to try,
Yeah.
because sometimes it's like, what do I need? I don't know what I need. And it's like, oh
Yes.
my gosh, I have a tendency to do this. Maybe I need a rest.
Yeah.
Or, and so it just helps you put language and additional insight. So
Yeah.
such a powerful question.
And I'm glad you said that because there was a time where I would have heard that, ask what you need, and I would have been like, well, now what? And so totally, I'm past that point. Like I
Yeah.
know the things that I can do once I ask the question, but there was a time where I didn't. So I appreciate that. And I know of many people who actually have a list written down and they stick it in a shelf on a bookshelf. And when they're starting to feel something, they'll literally pull out the list and go, do any of these feel good right now? And whether it's read a book or take a shower, take a walk or have some water or meditate or, call a friend, whatever it is, just so that they have that list to pull from.
Yeah, so smart, so smart. One of the other things, and we don't have time to get into this and the amount of questions that I had, but the other thing that threes are excellent at, as we've talked about, are that goal setting.
Yeah.
And what I love, and I thought was such a good example that you're setting, is that you have this podcast. And then I'm going to ask you about your specific goal here in just a second that you have for your personal brand or the show. But what I think that I would just want to pull out from that is that um, sometimes, again, depending on who you're following or what sort of advice you're taking in, or just the expectations that you have for yourself, it feels like I'm failing if I don't have 10,000 subscribers, an email list, a freebie, a YouTube channel, and then I'm speaking and, a course and all these things. I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's so much. But here you are, have other things going on, motherhood, wife, being a friend, potentially this other business, and this podcast that you have a vision for, but you're not necessarily doing all 20 of those things just yet. And I think that can be really inspiring, actually, that it's not like you have a $10 million business right now. But sometimes we feel like we should have that and something's wrong with us. So I love, it's like, hey, I'm curious, at least this is what I'm seeing. And then please feel free to add in the background to this, but it's like, hey, I'm interested in this topic. I'm not a therapist, but I'm interested in learning from them. And so it's not even, we have to be the pressure to go off and get a certification or another degree. It's just, what are you curious about? How can you curate that information? And honestly, like, that's such a leadership thing to do. It's like I'm pulling together these resources and these people and sharing their stories and serving it up on a really easy platform like a podcast and here, and then being open with your own experience. And I just thought that I just love that you do that. I think that's can be really inspirational and a specific idea for somebody who's like, I don't know where to start. I don't love my job. I want to start a business on the side, but I don't know what that is. And it's like, well, maybe start with this podcast potentially, or a blog, or, so anything else you want to add to that, or I got wrong, feel free to.
No, yeah, no, it's spot on. I mean, I've considered going and getting a degree, and most of the people in my life think I should, but, yeah, it's for me, it's recognizing what I don't know, and just really knowing that if I don't know it, other people don't know it. And so how do we all learn it? And then sort of that efficiency piece of, I want it all in one place. I don't want to have to go to 35 different podcasts and books, even though I do listen to hundreds of podcasts and read all the books. But really, ideally, I want it all in one spot. I want to learn about my marriage. I want to learn about my kids. I want to learn about my body. I want to learn about how to launch my business, like all in one place. And the connector for me was mental health. So it's not a business podcast. It's not a parenting podcast, but we take those things and we look at them from the point of view of maintaining or bettering your mental health. Because for me, that's always what it comes down to. I cannot be the wife or the mom or the business person that I want to be if I'm in bed under the covers with the lights off. So, whatever I want to do in my life, whatever anyone listening wants to do in their life, to me, it starts with the mindset, it starts with the mental health. The other thing I was thinking as you were talking about the fact that I have a show and like what the level of success is, right? And the followers and the subscribers, like that is big for me. And I've said this on the Mental Health for Creators live series. I'm like, on one hand, I'm creating content to help people. On the other hand, I'm refreshing daily what my downloads are. And I'm checking how many people like that post and how many followers I've gained that month. And no shame, it's important to me. I want to see it go up. I want to, because to me, that equates to influence. That equates to yeah, it's validating. It's validating for me. And that's how I view someone is getting something out of what I'm doing. I know plenty of creators who are completely and wholeheartedly fulfilled by a single DM a week that says, thanks for what you do.
Mm.
That would be very fulfilling for me. And then I'd go, okay, let's go over 2 DMs. Like yeah. And I have to catch myself and I have to work on that. And something that my therapist always reminds me when I'm in a mode like that, I'm in a headset like that, like wanting more. She's like, you have a podcast with almost 100 episodes out. Like 2 years ago, you didn't even know that you wanted a podcast, And so whether it's my therapist or my husband, or hopefully I get to the point where I can remind myself that, but it's celebrating those, it's celebrating what I have. That I don't know. It's like, it's different than gratitude, right? But it's looking at a milestone and not seeing it as not enough as the next, and just celebrating it for what it is.
That is very much the work of those in that assertive
I
future focus,
know.
especially the 3.